Greetings again to all of our missionary family and friends. I have with you today Randy Jumper, missions pastor at First North Little Rock, Assembly of God, and dear friend of missionaries and missions, and a great, great brother. So, Randy, thanks so much for taking the time to be with us. I know you guys are busy and 101 things going on, but I appreciate your time with us.
I am honored to be able to talk into so many of key people in our movement and the kingdom right now. So what a privilege to be able to share with you.
Thanks again. I appreciate it. Let's go to our first question. What is taking place right now in your district with churches opening? What does that look like? Is there a plan? What are they saying right now?
Sure. It's the second week of May right now. And in fact, you see me dressed. I'm in rain gear. It's a Tuesday. We have our first live to the public open service in a matter of about an hour and a half. And I'm parking lot attendant today in the rain because we can only have staff only, and we have all these measured off spaces and what you can and can't do. So I apologize. But yeah, and I'm in Arkansas district. We have been privileged and blessed in Arkansas to be sort of behind some of the larger curve. And so our state is a rolling open right now from a district perspective. We have 5 campuses that are opening up this weekend associated with us. Most of my friends are this weekend or next who are opening their churches. We had a few who opened last weekend, obviously following the governor's guidelines as best as they can. Our state's unique. We have a governor who is very sensitive to faith-based organizations and churches.
Wow.
He has not made any stipulations or mandates for how the church is to operate. So we have no state requirements per se. We have recommendations and guidelines, which then each place is making in its own. Essentially, you can think in terms of during this phase, we're about 1/3 of our operational size. Now, what remains to be seen is how many people will actually show up this week.
Yeah.
Just in fairness, who's going to come, and we'll just see we'll find out what happens.
Yeah, we all know it's a moving target, and it's different from state to state, and understandable with concerns and health risk, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
And I know this is a really we've never ever that I understand and as I look at a timeline, have experienced this kind of just season that we're in with our itinerating missionaries. It's truly a remarkable historical time, and we're all walking together and wondering, figuring things out. And so, we're praying for our missionaries, and we're just believing God that He continue to supply and help them, and we're doing our best to give them the support that they need during this time. So what would be the best approach that you would say a missionary needs to have with a pastor during this pandemic season?
Yeah, it's a difficult time. My heart hurts for everybody who is in the middle, or especially just starting your itineration cycle. We've got a unit out of our church here that just got their MA status appointment for the summer, and meeting with them the day after tomorrow to talk about, so what do you do? How do you contact churches, and how do you contact leaders? How does it work? I think what I would say is this. I can speak from my own context and my own reaction. I consider myself in our church some of the most specifically world missions focused people in our movement. We're not the top, but we're not the bottom, and we're trying to do our best to engage the international community. But even I felt myself, Gil, a couple times over the last 9 weeks when I got a request from a missionary for a service. I got a request from a service like the second week into this, and I thought, what service? I can have you over to my house and you can sit 6 feet in the distance from me. We still didn't know at that point what we were doing. And so even I had just a little bit of an edge to it. So I guess here's what I would say to folks. First, I would say this: when God called you to this season, he knew that this was happening.
Very good.
So you can't neglect the wisdom and the intelligence of God that COVID didn't catch him by surprise. And so when God spoke to you to go to wherever it is you were supposed to go, it wasn't like, oh, stink, now what are we going to do? Somehow he has a plan for you in this season. I can't tell you what that is, but you got to hold on to that
That's good.
his calling then was fully aware of what was going to happen right now. And so you can't just dismiss what you're calling. You can't dismiss what happened. God knew this was going to happen. Now, what do you do? I think I would do a couple things. First, I'd be incredibly sensitive when I communicated to pastors. And I think this ups the personal contact more than simply cold emails. And when I say that, I think right now what we're all experiencing is a lack of human connection.
Right.
And so I actually think you got a better chance of catching people on the phone than you ever have before. But I just do. I think that when you get them, when you get that leader, that church member, that pastor on the phone, you've got to be sensitive to their situation. In the last 3 weeks, I've talked with friends who have not taken paychecks, who have cut all expenses at their church to just minimal. I've got some friends that I've seen online who have cut off the utilities to their facilities to save money during this season. And so all of it, almost every one of them, to maintain their outreach and missions giving. So it's not that they don't want to. It's just we're in a season of not knowing. And so you got to be sensitive to that and aware of that. That said, we added a missionary last week. We added someone to support last week when they contacted us. So it's not like zero. But I won't lie to you, Gil. We're trying to be very wise and very careful in how we're approaching this because we don't know what our income is going to be. We had a great month for missions this last month, but we don't know if that's going to be the same thing this month. And so when I say you have to be sensitive, I think missionaries have a real opportunity right now to be healing and strength ministering and grace ministering to people.
That's good.
If I was in that scenario, I think I probably would be calling through my friends and relationships and simply just encouraging and praying. I would be leaving voicemails with quoting the best Psalms and Isaiah passages I could come up with. I would be saying weeping endures for the night, but joy comes in the morning. Pastor, praying for joy and your morning to come soon. Love you, Randy Jumper. I would be seeding that way right now. Mm-hmm. Now, the answer is, well, that doesn't help my budget. And I get that. I do think Alton Garrison was one of my former pastors, my district superintendent, and he had a way of saying the hole you put in is the hole you take out of. And what you stick in is what you pull out. And I think right now we're in a season of planting more than harvest. And that would be my first suggestion.
Yeah, that's really, really good, Randy. And I know there's a lot. It's a moving target right now, and we're all trying to do our best to cope with it, to deal with it, to endure it as well. But that's really, really good. A good word that you leave with our missionaries in terms of how they can approach, pastor. Final question I want to ask you, and you've kind of alluded to it, but I was just wondering if you have any thoughts on what other advice would you give a missionary during this time?
I think it's important that that missionaries understand that I have been in a perpetual state of reinvention as a church leader for 10 straight weeks. So every 2 weeks, I have completely changed what I was doing the prior 2 weeks. What I mean by that is federal and state guidelines shift. My congregation has shifted. I have become that which I've despised forever, and I am a TV preacher now. I mean, if folks watching will just extend their hands toward me right now. I mean, all the things that I have not, that I maybe even have popped on just a little bit. Now I'm forced to do. And then I'm asking, is this even working? Is this what the Lord wants? Am I being a good steward of resources? Am I being a wise minister of the gospel? Is this kingdom impact, or is this church perpetuation? Which is it, and is that a bad thing? And so I had strategies for missionaries early in that process. All of that got scrapped. Like my whole plan that we agreed to, we said, this is how we're going to incorporate missions during this COVID season, week 3, all of that changed. And just because it wasn't going to work in
Yeah.
the situations. And so some of you may have seen a video I did with some others for AGWM at the beginning of this crisis, where I talked about, man, this would be a great opportunity for missionaries to join call lists. And we have Derek and Tammy Walker here, and they live near us. And so they were coming and calling our church people, they were just calling people on our behalf, not fundraising, not just saying, hi, I'm Derek and Tammy, I'm with First Assembly. Just want to tell you we love you, we're praying for you. That was a good plan. But our governor said we couldn't do that. They couldn't bring those people on site anymore. That's what I'm saying. We just had to perpetually reinvent.
Yeah.
So what I would say is give us some space to figure this out. And at the same time, find a way with graciousness and with humility, still share the call that God has on your life. In fact, right now may be more about sharing your call than your need, and talking through the lostness of this world and how God's pulled you into that place. Using those stories and those testimonies right now would be great. We're blessed. We're a church where we've got some capacity for recording and those things. Man, if I was a missionary and I could share my story publicly, I would be in front of a camera and I'd be recording 2-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute testimonies, not necessarily about missions, but just about miracles and about God's provision and about God's protection. And I would record those from the field, and I would send them to my top supporting friends or my pastor friends and say, hey, listen, as you're preparing your messages for online, I know you need video material. Here's a story. It's yours to have.
Mm.
Just being a resource to folks right now, to pastors, would be a huge, huge, huge blessing. Now, real world, Gil, I think the vast majority of the people who've offered, the great missionary force in our community, who have offered to help us, we really haven't needed/used their help. But the offer and to know that they were there was the most significant. I'll tell you this story and then I'm done. About week 4, I hit the wall. Just rainy jumper in my ebb and flow. Week 4, I was frustrated. I was angry. I was every psychologist out there, I was hitting their scales on what was going on. I was wondering if what I'm doing mattered, et cetera, blah, blah, blah. It was 3 well-placed, God-timed messages from missionaries who just simply said to me, we can't imagine what you're going through. And Randy, you've always been there for us. We're here for you. We love you and we're praying for you. 3 different messages received throughout the day. Now, I talked to one of them, and I'm pretty confident that that individual was working a system through all their support throughout the process. There was nothing magical or spiritual, supernatural about their strategy other than it was a God strategy that God used in my life. The other one was a word of wisdom, word of knowledge. It just felt like the Lord told them to do it. Regardless of whether God told them or God inspired them to create a system, both were used to make a difference in my life. And I don't believe in quid pro quo, but I will say this, that the people that have put into me, those are the ones I remember later down the road. I think we all do.
Wow. Wow, that's great, Randy. Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing. I know you have a service coming up, so I don't want to take too much of your time, but I just want to appreciate all that you guys are doing. And I trust that our missionaries will take heart the great words of advice that you've given them during this time. I know we're all just making our way, trusting the Lord and his provision, etc. But there are things that we can do. And I think you gave some great advice. So I'm grateful. So hey, we say to our missionary family, please remember to pray for Randy Jumper, his church there at First North Little Rock in Arkansas, the great work that they're doing. Lift up the pastor as well there, and all the staff. So thank you, Randy, for joining me during this time. We pray that God will continue to give you all wisdom and guidance as you forge forward during this season. Thanks again. We appreciate your time.
Thanks, Gil. Thanks for leading well.